talk about her work and around that work, but also newer work, sort of where she looks at sort of expertise effects and sort of embodiment of both clinical and sort of expertise populations. Our second talk will be by Akua Kuyatete, from Wolf Trap, and she will talk about children and body learning children who use performing arts and dance and creative movement in particular to aid STEM learning, but also expose children to sort of the principles of performing arts and more generally blending research with practice and how that might work. Our third talk will be by Lise Worthing Chowdhury, and we'll focus on dance intervention in the context of dementia. So, brain injury. So yes, brain injury and concussions. I remember that now. Yes, so that's going to be interesting. And then the final talk will be me, and we will shift a little bit away from dancers to dance audiences, and I will talk about liveness and live performing arts and in dance, and we're going to watch some dance rather than do some dance. But just to start with, I'll hand over to Bea. The stage is yours.
Good morning, everybody. One second, I had a clever idea to close my computer. How is that? Yes? Do I need to talk here or can I move? Can I? This one? Yes. Okay. And this one as well? Okay. Okay, good morning, everybody. This is a very new experience for me. It's the first time I have behind me this beautiful landscape instead of my slides. So it's going to be very interesting. The same as the workshop, it's been 2 days very interesting. A truly combination of research, practitioners, interventions. I have learned a lot from monitors today, and I'm actually looking forward to share the kind of things I have been doing, and mainly to hear later the comments and ideas that you might have. As Guido has said, I'm a cognitive neuroscientist. I work in action observation, and I did a lot of action observation yesterday evening, and I emphasize in the observation. And that's my specialty. I have no background in dance. So I think I'm looking forward to hear the perspective of many of you, that they have a much wider perspective on this topic. So let's start with my talk. So I don't know, this is in the middle here. Is that somewhere? Okay. So just as a glance, I want to put my time in. Okay, I'll try to stay on time. At a glance, I'm going to talk about these things, and I'm going to show you some experimental evidence what we do. I'm not going to go very much into these experiments, but I'll be very happy to translate, or you can always Imermin or in the lunch break. The first thing I would like to discuss is
Can everybody, excuse me, can everybody mute their microphones? Mute your microphones.
To understand how we perceive other people's not measure the word aesthetic, aesthetic. So I got interested into that as well. And later, I want to talk about a topic we have been developing later that is about emotional expertise. What is it in the dancer that makes them so good at many things, and amongst other things, emotion perception? And all of this I will do under the umbrella of embodiment, the concept of embodiment. And I will highlight a few methods we have used to measure embodiment, because we talk about embodiment very often, but I'm not very sure we are talking about the same concept of embodiment, or if we know or agree on how to measure it. Okay. So how does the brain process dance? Let's think about me. It's not all about me. If I'm watching a dance video like the one we have here, according to the neural theory that it has been around for a while, I will be internally simulating those movements in my head, reaching some kind of representations I have related to them. Now, that's me. As I said, I have very little dance experience, so those representations will not be very accurate. What happened if the same video, the same movement is watched by experts, dance experts, that they are very familiar with that movement, they have performed it a lot, they have it in their motor repertoire, and they know how to do it, how it feels to do it, what it means, they have memories associated to that. So obviously the representations they can engage will be much rich. So we did that first study some years ago with Patrick Haggard at UCL, where we basically tested this question. So we had two groups of experts in movement, ballet dancers. At that time, there were ballet dancers from the Royal Opera House and a group of capoeira dancers. Why ballet and why capoeira? We wanted two groups of motor experts that they have a very long-term training, but that they were very distinguishable. So the ballet dancers would have never probably danced capoeira, and the capoeira dancers never probably danced classical ballet. So we put these two groups in the scanner to watch videos from these movements. And when I say videos of dance and videos of capoeira, they were basically, you have here an illustration, 3-second clips of very short dance movements. These movements, they were chosen with a choreographer, and that was the first time I started to use choreographers, people from the art domain, to inform science. And we wanted to get a set of movements that were kinematically comparable. So they were more or less the same number of jumps, movements of the arms, and movements of the legs. Okay, and what we found is that picture on the top, the numbers we have represent areas that we normally find in the action observation network. And we found that these areas are more active, they engage more when the dancers see the style that they know. And the picture at the bottom basically shows this. It shows that the bars in red is when this is activation in the premotor cortex. When the ballet dancers is watching ballet, activation is stronger than when they are watching capoeira, and the other way around for the capoeira dancers. Interestingly, when control participants without dance experience, in that case, a group of psychology students, they watch capoeira, the premotor cortex didn't make any difference. So they respond equally. So this was one study amongst many that were coming all at the same time that suggested that motor learning has an effect on perception. And we have evidence from Guido that is here. That's how we met many years ago, Emily Close, and this evidence has been accumulated for years. But I think it's very interesting that this initial collaboration with dancers started to understand how the action observation system works. So dance informed neuroscience. But then, as I said later, before, after working with dancers, it was impossible to avoid the question of aesthetics. Because when we watch dance, people like it or dislike it, or you appreciate it, but there is an emotion, appreciation, or aesthetic process there. So we look a little bit into that. So how do we, how does the brain process movements that we like? And this was a very simple question that we just threw the first study we did that, where we had the same ballet and capoeira videos that we had before. These are participants without experience, and they watch this in the scanner, and then we ask them to rate them in many different dimensions according to the Berland categories, complexity, symmetry, but there was also another category of liking and preference. And then we look back at the brain and see which brain areas are more interested or respond strongly when we see videos that we like compared to videos that we dislike or like less. And this is basically what we found. So we found an activation in the left, in the right, those are motor cortex that we had seen before as part of the action observation network. So this area, this sensory motor area seems to be responding more when we see movements that we like. Now we can put the question in two ways. We can say, do I like this dance movement because my somatosensory areas are responding more strongly? Or do I have a strong activation in the somatosensory, in the sensory motor cortex? Therefore, I feel kind of higher preference. So what is first, the sensory motor response or the preference? I don't think we can answer this question, and I would like to answer this question. So ideas are very welcome. And another idea that I saw in another conference with a combination of choreographers and dancers is that if we are able to create a library that we know exactly how it tunes the somatosensory and the sensory motor cortex, can I predict which movements the brain will like, which movement the audience will like. And I think maybe 10 years ago, this is quite old, this is 2008, people look at me very happy, and there were two responses in the choreographer side. I don't know what people hear from choreographer think. The ones who love the idea that you could create this library and tailor the aesthetic response in the brain, and the ones who didn't like it at all. But this is something I would like to continue. Yeah, it's an unanswered question that I have in the back of my head. So we come to this idea of sensory motor importance in aesthetics. And this sensory motor idea was initially related to the mirror neuron system, but now we are often using the term embodiment. And there is a term called embodied aesthetics that it comes from philosophy and cognitive science, but we can use it here as well. Basically, it suggests that that the human mind is largely determined by the form of the human body. So the body has a very important role in shaping the mind. And when we talk about embodied aesthetics, if we think about art, visual art, what people suggest, this is the word from Friedbach and Galese, is that when we see, like you see here a picture, a painting of Jackson Pollock, you can see the picture, and just by the observation of that picture, you will be internally simulating the strokes that you need to perform that painting, okay? So you embody or simulate the movements of the artist that were required to do that painting. Then there is also the case when the painting has a body on it, like in this case, this is a painting Christina Ward. And on top of simulating the paint strokes, you can also simulate the represented body. And if you know the painting, you might know that the person in the painting, she could not walk, so she was crawling up the hill. So you might simulate that kind of feeling. And you can also simulate the motor knowledge, if you know this, by looking at the painting. So there is a lot of information that that is feeding in your processing when you observe art. Now, what happens when we observe dance? Something very interesting is that when we observe dance, there is a direct correspondence between the artistic object, that is the dancer, and the body of the observer, because we all have a body, but we also have many representations of our body in our brain. And yesterday, we heard a very interesting description of the sensory motor cortex and the motor cortex, and the very many representations at the sensory level, at the motor level that we have. And all those representations are there and active while we are watching the dancer. But which role do they play? Can we investigate that? I think we can investigate that, but it seems like a very big question. So what we did at that time is try to make the question a bit more easy, more simple. And we try to disentangle the dancer from the dance. So from here, we developed two lines of study. In one, we had only the body of the dancer showing a procedure, but didn't have any movement. So it was only a dance posture. And on the other hand, we had another set of studies where we kept only the movement. So if you attach lots of lights in the joint of a dancer, this looks like in the 90s, but this is literally how we did this video. We didn't have the technology that we saw yesterday, so this is also a bit old. You can see perfectly the movement, but you don't see the dancer's body. So we investigated in different studies the dancer's body and the kinematic of the dance. Very briefly to show you one study that I did with Guido here. This is our first study, experimental study together, Guido, and it is the last one also. Nothing went wrong. We published, we had fun, but he never came back to the lab with me. So in this paper, we thought we had a great idea. So we have been working several years on how the brain process body information. So we want to ask if these areas in the brain that process body information and that they have a body representation, if they participate in the aesthetic perception of these postures. And in order to do that, we apply TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, to the extrastriate body area, so an area that participates in body perception in the visual cortex, temporoparietal cortex, and also in the premotor cortex, and we know that have also a kind of motor representation of our body. So we apply TMS, we disrupt the activity in these areas, while participants were doing a very simple aesthetic task. They were looking at different dance postures and they have to decide which ones like the most. And we also have some control stimuli that were scrambled pictures. And what we found is that when we applied TMS in this area, we didn't change the perception, aesthetic perception on the scrambled picture, but we did change the perception on the body pictures. So that means that these areas, both of them, they contribute to whatever process is happening and whatever process you need to make an aesthetic decision about that body. And equally, we did something very similar in the fMRI scanner, but this time we had the video. So we had the same people watching the videos and having to decide aesthetically between two of them on having a visual control task. And we found that when they had to do the aesthetic task, there was a stronger resonance, a stronger activation in this area here, that is sensory motor and somatosensory cortex bilaterally. So again, part of that action observation network that is more engaged when you have to do an aesthetic decision on the dance movement instead of a very basic visual decision. At this last study, I still have to write it up. So, okay. And now we come to the real truth. I was very enthusiastic with my idea of recomposing the movement bodies and the point light display. But the ugly truth about my research, I've been told many times, is that what you can see here, there's not so much movement, there's no dance, there's not really emotion. I also heard there's not really music, whether that's important or not, according to different people. And also, where are the other dancers? Sometimes this is a social event. So yes, I go around saying that I investigate how the brain processes dance, but this is dance. Is dance what I so this is when Julia Christensen, that was supposed to be here today also, who could not come. She's in the Max Planck. She's a postdoc with us for a couple of years, and now she's, no, I started late.
That's why you guys have to laugh. You have to know it.
Julia could not come. And Julia was a dancer herself. She was a dancer, and then she got an injury and went into psychology. And she came, and she had spent she did spend her PhD doing a normalized library of dance movement, ecological, from real dance performances, and validate them according to several categories related to the emotion, arousal, valence, many categories. And the library was huge, 200 movements. So suddenly there was a tool there, an instrument that I could use to answer more questions. And we did one study using music, but I'm not going to talk about it. And some other studies that are a bit more ecological. So let me give you a hint on this emotion expertise. So how sensory motor expertise of the dancers modulates or changes emotion perception. And again, let's go a little bit to the general domain. We have been looking at how we change the behavior, or how we have, if dance expertise change or preference, or behavior, or subjective response, but also because we were looking at emotion, we look at the physiology, electrodermal activity. So to look at differences in the body to perceiving different emotions in dance. Now, before moving to dance, if I show you these pictures here, and I ask you, is showing a happy emotion or a negative emotion? Which ones of you say this is a happy one? Okay. I guess I have to answer the question to see if you are paying attention or just. Which ones of you think this is a negative emotion? Okay, thanks. So, so it's kind of very easy. So people like me without art experience can do the task, and people with art experience, like dancers, they can do the task and they are very good. Now, I have two dancers here with me. So I want to take advantage because I never have a talk where, sorry, Jackie, please, where I can show the dancers. This improvised thanks to this stage. I thank you very much for joining me this short notice. So Jackie and Courtney are going to perform a piece, and then I'm going to ask you some questions. So now you both pay attention, and if I ask you a question, Jackie, who thinks that Jackie is showing a movement that carries positive emotion? Who does think that Jackie was showing an emotion, a movement that carry positive emotion. Okay? Who does think that Connie was doing a movement that carried positive emotion? Same people, some of you. Oh, well, if one of them was doing the movement expressing negative emotions, and the other was doing the movement expressing positive emotions, and I don't know which one was which. I know. You were positive. And she was in the same movement with a negative emotion. Now, thank you very much. Thank you for this live demonstration. My stimuli were not as interesting, but were something like that they came from this library from Julia. So participants have to see this series of videos, and they have to rate the emotion at the end. So they say that they look at the videos and they rate the emotion at the end. And then we look at the galvanic response when they did that. And so I'm going to move to the results straight away. What we found basically is that participants were quite good at recognizing the emotion, but the body, the physiological response, was sensitive to positive emotions, negative emotions only in the dancers, not in the control group. Meaning that the dancers were feeling more extremely the positive and the negative movements than the controls. So that's emotional sensitivity that dancers have. I find quite interesting, but there is an additional question I want to throw before finishing. That is this emotional sensitivity that we find in the dancers specific to seeing dance because they are familiar with the movements, they may know the story, they have done that before, so it's just specific to the movements that they know, or is it emotional sensitivity general to all kinds of emotional expressions? And I want to skip that, and I want to focus on the emotional expressions. So this study is done by my PhD student Vasiliki Menetoki. And basically, we look at how the dancer's brain responds when watching emotional content, but not dance, but faces. So faces with emotional content. And we are all very good at seeing faces and recognizing the emotions, but are the dancers showing a differential response? And we use this ERP methodology, and I'm not going to go into the detail, but basically what we do is that we not only measure visual evoked potentials while they are watching at faces, because we know that there is a lot of work in how the visual cortex processes faces and faces with emotional content. But we also evoke somatosensory evoked potentials at the same time to look at the somatosensory response, how that body representation that we have engage in recognizing emotions. And this data is it's in presentation. We are working with Vasiliki to write it up. But what is very interesting is that we find difference. We find a group effect that interact with the task. We have a classical emotion recognition task and a gender task, where in one of them they have to recognize the emotion of the person, and in the other one they are looking at the same pictures, but they have to recognize the gender of the person. And we find interaction, so we find a difference of how dancers and control perceive those faces in the emotional task. So interpretations and meaning are in progress, but something interesting I want to highlight here is that we have exactly the same study done with the dancers and with another group of population with adults with autism spectrum disorder. And we found the opposite effect. So we have two groups of people, well, three control participants, dancers that they are very good at emotional sensitivity. And this was a group of autism spectrum disorder that they are normally known for not having a very good emotion recognition or low levels of embodiment. So we have maybe here a dimension that moves in, if the dimension is embodiment, it moves from really high levels in the dancer, control typical developed participants, and people with difficulties in recognizing emotion. And that's basically it. That's the same slide from the beginning to summarize. So I guess I want to thank everybody before Guido takes away the microphone. but all of you. But I also would like to thank the organizers. To thank the organizers for bringing all of these people together for very different, coming from different places, but also with very different backgrounds. It's very interesting from somebody like me with a very focal background in neuroscience to hear the talks from this week. So I'm looking forward to your questions, but mainly to your comments later after Guido has given and to the next speaker.
Okay, I think we have time for a couple of questions. Yeah, or three.
Yeah, so talked about the mirror neurons and all that, but I don't see the relevance of that here because I'm not a dancer and I watch dance and I really enjoy it, presumably the physical movement and all that stuff that I can't possibly have. I mean, I can only react to the amazement. So I don't understand how I'm closing those.
It's not a matter of degree. I also have the ability. That's why my representation is less accurate and my response is less intense. But there is, you can always link to some kind of proximity. There's something here, always the leg coming up here. So there is a link. It's not precise as the one that a dancer can have, but you have that sensory connection with your body.
Why did your control group didn't have the reactions and all that?
They have a little bit of activation. The difference, the
I
important,
can only react a little.
no, the important thing is that there is a difference, a significant difference in the intensity of the response in these areas. It's not that the areas are sleeping, but I don't know, if some of you might say me, but there is a difference in the intensity between the groups. I'm going to take a
I just have a small question. Part of the science of aesthetic education. And so my question is, before I learned about aesthetic education, I was still a dancer and I perceived dance, but I wasn't having as large of a response as people I began to do aesthetic education practices, which I found when I was watching dances in that way. I was doing micro movements as I was watching the dance that I didn't have before. And there was a transition period where I could feel my body wanting to move, and I could sort of repress that. And so as I began to sort of more involved in sort of education practices, I wanted to dance as I'm watching dance. And so I wondered, are you ever watching people who are watching dance or analyzing micro movements or larger movements that they're doing as they're proceeding?
Great question, and I really like the idea of explore more holistic all that combinations of the observing observers. I haven't, but there is a whole. I like the idea. I haven't seen. I don't think it has been done. Several people, Emily Cross has worked a lot in investigating how to build these representations and looking into people when they are training to be dancers. And there is also when there is more done on the observers, when you are a very expert observer, but you don't have the movement. But all these in between combinations, they need to still be explored. So, well, there's a lot of room for new work. If
for this talk. My question had to do with the activation pattern, while humans observe dance that they like versus dance that it's kind of neutral. So I was surprised that you didn't find differential activation in any reward-related brain region, like the nucleus accumbens or something like this. So I'm wondering, did you find the same expression in the reward pathway? So was the reward pathway activated, or you didn't find it activated?
Yes, it's a good question. We didn't find anything else apart from that image that we found, and it was also a very small effect. But it was also all the movements where none of them were very salient. It's like, what did you like? Oh, this or that? Like I think newer studies, when we are now investigating the mechanism participating in emotional aesthetics, we definitely look at the work mechanism, and we have to include the stimuli that they are a bit more interested to engage you. So we didn't find them there, but I think the stimuli were not tailored for that. And it was a good start, but it opened questions more than giving answers. Okay.
Yeah. So how do you look at the effect of context? Because most of the work is done on videos, right? I want
Yes.
you to do that at the performance and see how that may affect the intensity and the ratings.
I have this excellent question. The short answer is I have not. The a bit longer answer is that in that first paper we worked with Corinne Yola, a few years later, after having the same idea, did a DNS study in the laboratory looking at her performance in front of you and in the dance theater. So they were in Glasgow and they had the dance theater and they were watching Sleeping Beauty, and people were having TMS there and measuring the motor response while they were watching. You need to be very brave to do this kind of studies. And now people that I also collaborated initially, like Guido, have moved into that. I have nicely kept quiet inside the laboratory. So it's all very interesting, but it's very challenging. So I think many people is starting to do it, not me. But yes, I guess it's a step forward. After lunch, you catch me at lunch.
Yes, thanks again. Another applause for Maria.
Thank you.
I'm very pleased to say that we're perfect in time up until now, so I'm passing on to Akua now. Stage is yours.
Thank you. Let me see if I can make sure that this is computer place. Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Akua Kuyate Tate. I'm the Vice President of Education here at Wolf Trap Foundation for the Performing Arts. And it's just really wonderful to have everyone here today and over the last couple of days at Wolf Trap. This has really been an honor for us to be a part of this. I'm here with colleagues in the fields of early childhood education, arts education, higher education, and research. So we are presenting together today. And we're presenting on early childhood STEM learning through the arts, through creative movement, the interchange between practice and research. Now, you have a one-pager that kind of gives you the outline of how we're going to proceed through what we do today. There's also a QR code and a URL link that you can access resources that are related to what we're presenting today. But you're not going to need to look at them like this. Okay. Our work is focused on with Wolf Trap Institute for Early Learning Through the Arts, the flagship program of Wolf Trap Education for the Performing Arts. In over 40 years now, we've partnered with early childhood institutions, including public school districts, social service agencies, private and community-based early childhood programs. Anywhere where you find young children learning, we have partnered with them. And in this partnership, we're utilizing arts integration, that's learning in and through the arts, and this active learning that includes for us the performing arts, music, dance, drama, and puppetry. And is to support children's cognitive, social, emotional, and physical development across all learning domains and areas of instruction, including science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM, literacy and language development, along with developing skills, communication, collaboration, problem solving. So we do this, and we also provide professional development for early childhood educators so that they can include arts integration in their practice. The way that we do this work, and I should say we actually are doing this work and with 23 affiliates across the US and in Singapore who have adapted this model of Wolf Trap's work. So our work is in 30 states, the District of Columbia, and in Singapore. When we do this work, it really is about having early childhood educators and teaching artists partner in the classroom. And so through this partnership, they are integrating the arts into the lessons with the children in the classroom. And there's a professional development process of the teaching artists sharing techniques and strategies to implement inside of the learning for the children, along with providing the early childhood classroom teacher professional development techniques and strategies that they can use in their practice going on. So what we're going to do today, you're going to hear from, you're going to experience, let me say, you're going to experience, and you're going to listen to, and you're going to engage in conversation. So this is a multi-sensory experience today for you. And we're going to start first with our teaching artists, master teaching artists, and our master teaching artists are Amanda Whiteman and Terry Codd, and our Fairfax County early childhood educator, Christine McClure. And they're going to really show you and demonstrate what that learning looks like, and you're going to be a part of it. And also what that relationship is between that classroom teacher and teaching artist in that partnership. They're going to then discuss also what is that, how is that impacting what's for those children in the classroom, and how's it impacting for the early childhood classroom teacher who includes this in their practice, right? Then we're gonna bring up our partner from George Mason University, Dr. Audrey Parker, and she's gonna talk about how this type of approach arts integration supports the study for students who are going into the early childhood practice and how they integrate this, and why is this an approach that is provided at least by George Mason, and how does it support their learning. Then we're going to hear from our researcher, Dr. Yvette Clinton, and she's going to talk specifically about some of the work that she's done in terms of looking at the Wolf Trap model of arts integration and how it has impacted both children's outcomes in terms of their development, as well as teacher outcomes in terms of their perception of how they can actually use arts integration. So as you are looking at all of this work today, we want you to notice, and as you're experiencing it as well, we want you to notice that partnership interaction between the teaching artist and the classroom teacher. And we also want you to notice how the arts and the subject content is coming together inside of this learning experience. And this is what these experiences are for typically young children. When we say early childhood, we mean from infancy to 7 years old. But this is typically what you'll see today, what you'll experience today will be for pre-K and kindergarten and first grade. And then we also want you to think about you know, what other questions, what other ways might we study and look at this effect of arts integration on learning for young children as well as with teacher practice. So I'm now going to pass it over to our colleague, Amanda. Great.
Good morning. I'm just curious, how many of you have been in an early childhood classroom recently? A few? Yes. So we want you to experience what creative movement, dance, and arts integration looks like in an early childhood classroom. So I and Kristen and I will both be asking you to engage in a little bit of movement so you can see what this process feels like as if you were 4 years old. This experience we're going to share with you was originally developed for a kindergarten classroom, age 5. I've modified it as young as 3 to have this work with like 3 to 6 year olds. Keep that in mind. When I first go into a classroom, Kristen's a kindergarten teacher, we identify 2 goals, a curriculum or content goal, something they're working on, and an arts goal. The experience you're going to feel today, my arts goal is to have the children have a child-directed, full-body movement experience where they're feeling 2 qualities of movement in their body fully. Kind of my arts goal. I'm going to pass the mic to Kristen and she can speak a little bit about the curriculum content.
So the arts goal is going to be paired with the science goal of learning about weather. And today we're focusing on the force of wind. You can't see wind, but you can see the effects of wind. So that's what we're going to be trying to help the children embody today.
The first thing I want you as my children to understand is that wind is all around us, but we can't see it. We see the effects the wind has. And this is kind of a big concept for little ones. So I would always begin with, oh, there's air all around us. Look around. Do you see the air? Catch some air in your hands. Can you see it? No. Oh, but we can catch some air in our lungs as well. So take a deep breath. I created this experience pre-COVID. It feels a little wrong right now. Take a deep breath in your lungs. Fill it up in there just like my Hoberman's here. Let's blow it out. The wind is moving air. The wind is moving air. Take some air into your lungs and blow it everywhere. So we do this a few times, and then Kristen and I might give the children some things that they're familiar with to make some observations. We can blow a light, gentle wind. We observe how that affects our feather, and then we translate those observations onto our hands. So how did that feather move when you blew a light, gentle? Oh, I see fingers moving gently. I see fingers swaying. And then we experiment with force a little bit. How can we blow a strong force wind? How does that affect our feather difference? So there's a lot of experimentation with things that children are familiar with. Kristen might take children out to the playground and make observations about what happens with a scarf on a windy day, observing the trees. Pinwheels are one they're familiar with.
Also, falling leaves if it's fall outside, or just going out. You can't go out that day, you can look out the window. What do you notice is happening in the trees or the plants around the school?
Kristen's classroom has a smart board, so we would observe some trees in the wind, one that's moving in a very gentle wind and one in a strong force wind. And we have developed a wind scale that the children sort of have an understanding of, 1 being a light, gentle breeze, 3 being a strong force wind, and something in between. And then from here, we want them to be able to communicate their understanding of force and wind and communicate that with their bodies. And a lot of these children are English language learners. They might not have the ability to give us the vocabulary to express that they understand force, but they can show us in their body. So Kristen's going to take us through a little bit how this might look with the children.
Okay, so I'm going to invite you, if you're able to stand in your place, and we're going to pretend today that we are a tree. And the first thing we want to do is plant our roots deep down into soil. So make sure that you have strong roots that are firmly planted. Feel your weight going down into the floor, and you feel the strength of your tree holding down into the ground. The feel, you can even wiggle your toes and feel your roots in the ground. And then show me your body is the trunk of the tree, standing tall, strong, and then maybe make some branches for your tree. What are some ways you could show branches? Oh, I see arms stretching out to the side. I see some up. I see some up and some down. Some are bent, some are curvy. And we see trees in nature that look like that all the time, all of those different ways. Now we're going to hear some sounds. Can you move your body to the sounds that you hear? I see gentle swaying back and forth. I see some people using the space in front of them. Some are using the space in behind us. Now let's see what happens when we hear a stronger wind sound. What might your body look like now with stronger wind? Oh, I see more of the trunks of the trees are bending. I see arms are moving faster a bit. Maybe bodies are bent over and over, so we have some arms moving at high levels and low levels.
Thank you, Kristen. So you can have a seat. From here, I really want children to take this to the next level and move full body in a full body exploration. And so I would, in lieu of time, I'm going to talk you through this a little bit. From here, I might say to the children, oh, we're just the trees in the forest. Now let's imagine we are a leaf and we've been plucked from the tree. I have two pieces of music. I'm wondering how your leaf might move through the classroom to something soft and gentle like this. And the children would move through the classroom more full body, a little more creative movement exploration, a little less teacher directed. And we would use observational language to describe the choices we see from the children. From here, I would play a heavier, stronger piece of music and ask them, how does that feel different in your body? Show me with your body. And Kristen and I would use observational language to describe the choices we're seeing from children. Just to speak a little bit about using observational language, it's something that's one strategy I always like to pass on to the classroom teacher. Using that to describe the vocabulary is building vocabulary. It's giving them ideas for different ways to move. It's validating their choices. And then I think one other thing Kristen and I were talking about that we thought was important to share is to move full body in a classroom to a piece of music like this. It's going to take a few sessions to get there. This isn't going to be a day one in a kindergarten classroom. We have to have some established rituals set up, some stop and starts that need to happen before children can really experience that all together, full body.
Yeah, I was just going to add that in order to move safely through the room and to have awareness of their body and space, there are lots of smaller sessions we would need to build up to that scale, so then they can experience that fully and safely.
Excellent. So I'm getting the get off the stage thumbs up. So with that note, I'm going to use my wind scale as a transition, and Kristen and I are going to blow off in a 3/4 wind and pass the microphone off to Ms. Turling Terry Todd. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies, my colleagues, and good morning to everyone. My name is Turling Terry Todd. Little people know me as Miss T for the obvious reason. So, this next Arts Integrated Science experience is going to be called Bear Nation Hibernation Dance. This is an experience that was created during a virtual residency that I did about a month ago. So, you know, we've got the technology going on, but I'm not there with the kids. So I have to make it as engaging as possible. Utilizing all of the notes that Amanda just gave about what we want to do. We use our art strategies. We use our arts integration language, all descriptive language. So without further ado, we're going to get started. So I would like to have 10 volunteers. If you could come up and just stand in a hula. And the reason we have hula hoops is because it was a virtual residency, I wanted to make sure that the students will have the, wow, I love it. classrooms that I was doing virtually, the desks were so close together, they just really didn't have a lot of room to work. We made it work, but with this particular class, they had enough open space that with the hula hoop, everybody could be in their own space. This is also a good classroom management tool, not having everybody running all over the room. And at the same time, using a prop is going to hold their attention. So you are now bears. So this is a unit that started out as, we were talking about hibernation of animals. And the kids were really interested in bears. So you are the bears, and we're going to go through the hibernation cycle. Prior to this, I had a meeting with the teachers, and I'm going to let Kristen just elaborate a little bit on how she feels about those meetings.
So as a classroom teacher, you start off by having a planning session with the artist, and the artist is bringing the art form, and the teachers sort of supplying information about the students in the class and the curriculum. And we work together to blend those things and figure out the best way to make it fun and engaging and a full body experience so that they can really deeply understand the concepts that we want them to learn.
Thanks, Kristen. So my bears are in front of me, and the first thing the bears need to do, I need to see your bear walk. Now we know bears are very heavy, they move heavy, so I need to see how my bears are moving. Oh, look at these bears. Are your arms heavy? Are your legs heavy? How are you moving, bears? I see some bears moving in a circle. Oh, some bears are picking up those heavy arms. And freeze bears. Fact, bears eat during the summer. They catch lots of fish, they eat lots of bears, lots of nuts and berries. So bears, show me how you're going to catch your fish. Children are going to be exploring grabbing, reaching, jumping, changing your levels. So they're gathering those fish, those salmon, they're getting some berries, they're getting some nuts, and they're eating, and they're almost ready. And now they're gonna pat their fat tummies because they're nice and full. Let me see those fat tummies, man. Oh, you look good. Very nice. Now the next thing, the bears need to build a den. A den is a huge circle, and they have to go inside the den to dig it out. Now, if you don't have a hoop, you're going to use your arms just to make your circle. But my bears, you're going to pick up your hoop, and you're going to show us your big circle. How would you show us your big circle? Yes. How would you use your body to get into that circle? Because you're making a den. Bears, can you see your head in the den? Let's see what it looks like. Oh, I see bears going in. Oh, come on out, bears. Can you reach your arm in? Can you reach your big paw? Can you dig? Can you clear that area? Oh, yes. Excellent. So the bears have now gone into the den. Bears, get into your den. All right. Back. Bears' heartbeat changes once they hibernate. They might start at 160. And by the time they're ready to hibernate, their pulse, their heart rate goes down to 8. So bears, I want you to show me your heart rate while you're sleeping, and you're going to count. Counting is a big part of preschool education, getting kids to count certain numbers. So bears, I need to count 8 heartbeats. I'm going to give you 8 heartbeats. Show me how your heartbeat would move. And hibernate bears, how are you going to sleep? Heart is beating. Bears, give me 8 slow heartbeats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Good job. Look up, bears. Well, one of the strategies that I like to use in the classroom is teacher enroll. We find that teachers who actually get involved and get enrolled really helps the experiences come alive. Children will tend to listen to our mystery guest as opposed to just Miss Smith or whoever. So our mystery guest is here. We have Miss Mystery Bear. She's here. Thank you, Mystery.
Thank you for having me today.
Mystery Bear, can you give us one more fact about bears?
Yes, I wanted to let you all know how important hibernation is for bears. All of my bear friends love to hibernate for about 4 to 7 months. So before we hibernate, we have to make sure we gather plenty of food, berries, fish, and nuts in the summertime so that we can stay in our hibernation, in our dens, for about 4 to 7 months. That's a long time. That's almost the whole school year.
Why, thank you, Miss Bear. Give Miss Bear a round of applause. Oh, Kristen illustrated a perfect example of teacher enroll. And her class is now going to be attentive. Miss Kristen is gone. All they see is Mr. Bear. And you notice it doesn't take a lot to transform. It could be gloves, pair of ears, whatever. But this is a great strategy and the teachers really do enjoy it. Kristen, can you wrap it up for us?
Sure. So when we use that strategy of teacher enroll, the kids are a lot more engaged. They want to explore more questions, and very often they ask me things that I don't know yet. That's a good opportunity to say, let's explore that more together. Where else can we find information about that, and where else can we learn about that? And then often their buy-in is so much more, and they're so much more engaged in the whole experience.
So we hope you enjoyed just a sample of some of the things that we do using our arts integration strategies. And the kids are still dancing, they're still moving, and they're having fun, and they're learning. Learning should be fun, and that's one of our charters here at Wolf Trap. Thank you so much. And who will be there? I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hart.
So good morning. My name is Audra Parker, and I actually coordinate the elementary education program at George Mason University. And I'm also a professor there. And we have students that are earning a bachelor's or master's degree in pre-K through 6 education. And I'm here today just to tell you a little bit about how our program partners with Wolf Trap to prepare teachers to be able to engage their students in the kinds of experiences that you all saw today. Those were 2 tremendous examples, but that doesn't just happen naturally. And we really do have to be thoughtful about how we ask teachers to think about developing the pedagogical skills to engage in that kind of planning of instruction. So our partnership with Wolf Trap actually has our students about 70 to 90. Pre-pandemic, we came to Wolf Trap. And while we were here, we engaged with teaching artists to really introduce our students to the idea of arts integration, to engage in the art forms themselves with the teaching artists, to really kind of plant the foundation for what it means to integrate arts into the daily practices of classroom teacher. And then the second phase of our partnership brings the teaching artists to Mason, where they come into our classroom there and really work in a more enriched way with our students in one of their classes. It's actually a social studies methods and arts integration course. And as a part of that experience, they dig much deeper into how they might integrate the arts into various activities in the content area of social studies and general methods in elementary ed. So it's a really wonderful partnership that's been developed over the last couple of years. But I think to really understand the impact and the intersection of arts integration and teacher preparation, it's really helpful to take a peek at the definition of arts integration. So if you are on, the slideshow, I'm just going to pop on through to the definition of arts integration, and then you'll notice it's color coded, and I can connect it to some of the key aspects of teacher preparation. So the definition of arts integration is it's an approach to teaching in which students construct. That may exceed outside of my technological skills, despite the pandemic. Oh, perfect. Thank you. All right, so the definition of art integration is an approach to teaching in which students construct and demonstrate understanding through an art form. Students engage in a creative process in which they connect the art form and another subject area, and they meet the objectives or the evolving objectives in both. And so if we really take a peek at that definition in some small chunks, we can start to see the overlap between arts integration and then teacher education and pedagogy. So approach, let's take that first keyword. Approach is a part of one's practice or beliefs. The approach of arts integration is really constructivist in nature. Children are working to solve problems socially and constructively together. That is a key pedagogy in teacher education, that we want our teacher candidates to help students construct their own knowledge. Understanding, the second key idea. That means just comprehending fully. The art form serves as a tool for helping students engage and understand content in a richer and more full way. That's exactly what we want in teacher preparation, right? To develop an understanding of concepts, not just regurgitate or experience recitation. So we want those multiple pathways for students to engage. Through an art form, right? So puppetry, music, drama, and dance are the focus areas here at Wolf Trap. The students can use those various art forms to demonstrate their learning. That's exactly what we want in teacher preparation. We want multiple pathways for teacher candidates to let students show what they know. Those are key principles in differentiated instruction and universal design for learning. And then connecting, that last piece of that definition, that joins or unites. It links a key curriculum area or content area with content. And then that's exactly, again, what we want in teacher preparation, that content isn't taught in isolation, but that it's integrated together. So the collaboration with Wolf Trap really helps facilitate our students' development of the pedagogies associated with teacher preparation through using art forms as a tool for engagement. And I think the last piece to think about for our partnership is that doesn't just impact our students who then become teachers, it impacts the mentors that they work with, the teaching artists, it impacts us as university faculty as we continue to grow and learn through that experience together. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Yvette.
Good morning. My name is Yvette Clinton, and I am a senior manager at ICF. We're a research and consulting firm headquartered in Fairfax, Virginia. We're a little bit different than a lot of the presenters here in that we're not an academic institution, and a lot of our funding comes from contracts as opposed to grants. So usually it's working with the client to find the scope of work of the work that we do. I first became involved in arts and education about 5 or 6 years ago. I was leading a project for the U.S. Department of Education, providing technical assistance to arts and education grantees. And after that ended, I became a partner with the Wolf Trap, and I've been helping the Wolf Trap design some of the evaluation of some of what you saw today.
You can take the microphone, and we can hear you better.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I'm a partner with Wolf Trap, and I have been working with them to evaluate their teaching artist residency. So what you just saw between Ms. Kristen and Ms. Amanda and Ms. T, I work to look at some of those impacts of the work. There's 2 purposes of our research and evaluation. I'm going to mostly share with you our summative evaluations, looking at the outcomes of the teaching artist residencies. And if you think about what you just saw today, there's a lot of different impacts that could happen. So one, you have the teacher who is learning some of these new strategies. They're learning about how to integrate their arts into their STEM curricula. They can develop more confidence with being able to do it. They might use these strategies more frequently than before they had this opportunity to work with the teaching artist. And then there's also potential impacts on the students. So as you heard Akua say earlier, that they're trying to impact students' cognitive skills, physical skills, social emotional skills, learning. There's a lot of different potential impacts. With regards to the formative evaluation, that is really understanding what is working well from the perspective of the different stakeholders. So, you know, the teachers that are part of this program are teaching artists. What do they think is really working well? And what do they see as areas that could possibly be enhanced? It's already a great program, but there could be suggestions that could make it better for certain teachers. I'm going to share with you a little bit about our pilot evaluation. And this was actually conducted during the 2019-2020 school year, which was the year of the pandemic when everything first happened. The participants included pre-K teachers from 2 Virginia school districts, and we were involved with the teachers, the teaching artists, and some of the evaluation tools that we use is we administered an assessment to teachers before they had experienced the residency that year. And then we also conducted classroom observations, and that was really focused on the interaction between the teaching artist and the student. So we didn't do as much interaction between the teacher and the teacher for this particular study. It was the teaching artist and the students. And then we also conducted teacher focus groups, and that was to get their feedback, the perceived impacts they had. How does this residency help them develop strategies to use arts in their classrooms? How do they see the students benefiting from this interaction and integrating arts more into their class? On this slide here, I know some of you don't have your computers, but I have a graph that displays some changes in the percentages of teachers who agree with statements about it's easy for me to develop arts integrated STEM lesson plans, and it's easy for me to teach arts integrated STEM lessons. So prior to the teacher coming into the classroom, or the teaching artist coming in to work with the classroom teacher, about 1/4 to 1/3 of teachers already said that it was easy for them to develop arts integrated STEM lesson plans. However, after the residency, the teachers, about 75 to 80% of those teachers said that it was easy. So there was a much higher percentage of teachers reporting that it's easy for them to develop the arts integrated STEM lesson plans. And we also found a similar pattern for it's easy for them to teach the arts integrated STEM lessons plans, the higher percentage of them reporting that they agree with that. One thing to note in terms of my evaluation with other projects is that teachers do report that it's easier for them to implement the lessons than it is for them to develop. So if you see Ms. Kristen working with her teaching artist, if they already have the lesson plan, it might be easier for her to go ahead and do it in the next year by herself versus coming up with a brand new, completely new idea on her own. I have a couple quotes, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to read the quotes. They are on the slide. I think the main takeaway is that the teachers talk about, in the focus group, they talked about how they really like that Wolf Trap really adaptable and flexible, and they could choose the content area that they wanted the teaching artists to come into the classroom. So today you saw weather, you saw hibernation with bears. You know, a teacher might have another preference. So that teaching artist is really flexible to be able to adapt to what that teacher wants. And I also liked how the teaching artist coming into the classroom would adapt to their level of comfort. So some teachers might be very comfortable doing dance. Some teachers might not be very comfortable doing dance. So the teaching artist is able to adapt to their level. Now, talking about impacts on children, we did not actually measure impacts directly with children, but we did ask the teachers for their perceived impacts. Prior to the teaching artists coming into their classroom, there was already a very high level of buy-in and belief that integrating arts into STEM is engaging for children and that it helps them learn academic content. It was about 85 to 95% of the teachers already agreed with that. At the end of the program, 100% of the teachers agreed with that. So every teacher that participated did agree that integrating arts and STEM is engaging and helps them learn academic content. On this next slide, I also have some quotes related to perceived student impacts. I'm not going to read them for the sake of time, but I think you should be able to access these online. One last thing that I want to talk about is opportunities and challenges. One thing I mentioned earlier is that we are, our work is contract-based. So a lot of times when we have partners that come to us, there's not a whole lot of funding for the evaluation itself. So sometimes we're somewhat limited in developing rigorous research evaluations such as RCTs. Another challenge with the RCT model is that a lot of times arts programs have partnerships already. They already go to certain districts or different schools, and they wouldn't want to deny some teachers from receiving this, this program because it could benefit so many students. So really thinking through, how we can still prove that there's, or show that there's evidence that there is some sort of impact, even if we don't have an RCT. Another thing to think about is defining and measuring student impacted learning. A lot of times districts and school leaders are really focused on assessment scores, and there's other impacts that could happen. And again, it does take money to go into the classroom to observe some of these student impacts, or to find other ways of having teachers report some of these impacts. Another thing to consider if you do a RCT is that sometimes there can be pushback from schools or teachers. They don't want their students assessed, or they don't want to take time away from their day or put effort into it when their students are not benefiting from the program itself. Lastly, I'd just like to mention that another opportunity is engaging stakeholders in the research and evaluation itself. So a lot of times we look at the participants as the subjects of the research, but actually there are certain situations where you can think about them as a partner, as a participant itself. So I've been involved in a situation where we actually ask the leaders to look at some of our protocols to give us feedback, because sometimes they're the ones with the lived experiences and can actually enhance our evaluation itself. So I just want to thank you and turn it back over to Akua.
At this time, we want to take the questions you have, and then we'll close out with one experience because we like to move. Okay, from here and then over here, okay? Yes, yes.
What's your process in developing the survey? We work together.
I worked together with the Wolf Tracks. I asked them what they were interested in learning from the evaluation. So the areas they're interested in, how do they use the art integration frequencies? But unfortunately, I couldn't report them because the pandemic happened, so they weren't really able to. There wasn't enough time to look at that. And then we developed how easy it was for them to develop arts in her lesson plan. So we will have this, this is something that's hard, but it's something that they can easily do. Because the ultimate goal is for them to continue to come after the evaluation.
It's happening.
Okay. Okay. So I worked in partnership with the Wolf Track to develop the survey items, so to find out what areas they're most interested in. And one of the things that they had expressed is they are really interested to know how easy or difficult it is for teachers to do this on their own. So a couple of sort of survey items reflected, it's easy for me to develop the plans, it's easy for me to implement the plans. There's also arts integration strategies, so they wanted to know, if you saw Ms. Kristen and Ms. Amanda, Ms. T, that there's different strategies that they have used. So we did survey them on how often they use different strategies, but because this was around the pandemic time, we weren't able to do the post-assessment with the frequencies just because there wasn't enough time for them to have opportunity to look at it different. So the items are really built in partnership with what Wolf Track is interested in.
We go here and then we go to.
Thank you. Can you talk about how you recruit artists, how you pay artists for the teaching partnership, and yeah, how integrated the artists are in the process?
So our artists come on board first they are professional performing arts. And then Wolf Track goes through a very extensive professional development for the artists so that they understand early childhood education and how it intersects with the art forms that they bring. We then have, and this is a full week of training, then we have ongoing training consistently for our teaching artists so that they can, if there's other things that are coming up inside of the area of early childhood education that we feel teaching artists need to know, or there are other types of opportunities. For example, with the STEM learning, we focus on science and engineering, and then we also teach the artists around the country. They are a part of that as well in the training. Multiple ways, depending on the community. So with arts councils within the communities, we have artists connect with other artists, so the idea is that we're really our intention and our desire is to be able to have more and more artists who are a part of a community that they live in, to be able to do the work.
So thank you for the program. So I'm coming from a university environment, and we love our inspiration, not only learning and research, right? Accomplish. And one of the questions that comes up is the question of metrics, right? Very important for policy decision, policy making, right? And also buying in, right? So what are the opportunities for universities, right? To conduct research with you, right? And because it is hard, just getting IRBs at the district level, or college level, right? So are there any mechanisms where we want to conduct study, right? And can harness that for right? Bring our research that could be used for obtaining the metrics that you need.
Absolutely. Many of our affiliates across the country try to make relationships for that purpose because as an arts organization, we need that extra, we need that resource. So we continue with our research partnership with George Mason, and while in practice, we continue to look at opportunities where we can connect with universities to do this kind of work. So yes, and if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, is there any
we don't have a specific procedure yet, and because all of our affiliates are autonomous organizations, so they make the relationship directly with institutions in the community, but we want to do more of that. So please, let's continue. One more question right there. Absolutely. The parents are a huge part of what we do as well. We used to do, and we want to do more. But a part of our program is called, we have parent involvement workshops, opportunities where the parents can engage with their children in an interactive experience with the teaching artists and sometimes with the classroom teacher, but mostly with the teaching artists. And the idea is for parents to understand how they can utilize arts to support their children's learning at home, in the grocery store, car, wherever they are. And so we have a series of those kinds of workshops that we usually, with our education partners, make available to parents as well. That's a real good question too, because we want to do more of that. We, in the past, youth orchestras, we really want to do more of that, so we're trying to collect more opportunities for that.
National Center Foundation. I want to also add that my staff yes. Right. So depending on your focus, but from the she's here. And so there are a couple of different things. From this researcher's point of view, if you are interested in sort of testing some of their ideas in the wild, using sort of the arts integrated programs to test some of your ideas and theories and bring them out into actual practice, there are programs that can do that. But there are also programs in the Education and Human Resources Directorate that are more focused on using the arts as a way of commuting science concepts as has been done here in this morning's demonstration. But what it requires is for someone to submit an application to the NSF, following the the requirements of that particular program. So if you're interested, I can please write to me, and I will try and direct you to the right programs depending on the ideas that you have.
This is very exciting for us because we want to make those connections. The idea of making the connections between practice and research is so critical for our work. So now we're going to finish with one last experience where everybody can be involved, and then we'll pass it.
All right, so this final experience you want to do it in your seat, you can just move in your seat. But this is Symphony of Sound from the Earth. So there are certain elements of the earth that are moving and making noise as you go. So we're going to become those elements. So all the people over here, you are going to be glaciers. You know that glaciers crack, melting, so you are glaciers. This is your sound. She likes my Fendi, my African Fendi. All right, our next one is oceans. All these people over here, you are the ocean. Okay, so here is your sound. Body is moving like the ocean. Please feel free to add sound effects. We're also looking at the qualities of movement. So you know the ocean is moving slow, sustained movement. You know the glaciers are sharp movement. All my friends right here, you are going to be trees. Trees and forests, swinging and swinging. So you want to stand into what you can, and this is your sound. And last but not least, everyone else who is over here, you are volcanoes. You are big, explosive, sharp, percussive movement. Okay. All right, so when you hear your sound, your body is moving the way that sound is going. The tempos may change, so you have to change the tempo of your body. Explore your levels. Explore all the range of movement that you can. So here we go. We're going to start out with our glacier. Ice glaciers. Now we have the oceans and the sea. Ice. And the next one we have our trees, our forests. I love that. And finally, we have our volcano. All right, now here's the test. We're going to do them all at the same time. So you really got to be listening so you can hear the sound. On 3, 2, 1. Slow it down. Can we get the sound from my orchestra here? We're going to sway into the side. You see everybody moving sideways, like a breeze. Breezes, breezes everywhere. Breezes, breezes in the air. Take your breeze and go in a big circle, and go around in a big circle with your breeze. All right. And let's take a big deep breath. Open it up, open the body, and close the body. Let's take one more big stretch. Open the body any way you want. And let's close it in 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you, everyone, for being
Thanks to our co-presenters, and special thanks to the parents, lecturers for coming on. And oceans. We're not going to do a formal coffee break, so get your coffee now. Sort of like squeeze out while we set up, change the sound setting slightly for the next speaker, which is Lise.
right? That it's like right now. Yeah.
If you are watching the PowerPoint, then my work is at the intersection of dance and my work is at the intersection of dance, biomechanics, and neurotrauma. And I started as a dancer, as a professional dancer in San Francisco for a while, got my Master of Science in Biomechanics, MFA in dance, and and PhD in neuromusician. There were also around clinical biology, certifications, and clinical certifications. And I have to be able to deliver medical exercise. So I got my certification in medical exercise specialist certification. And that seems to allow me to do this work that I want. So I want to start with disclosures. My work has been supported by a lot of NIH organizations, as well as the Corey, have had fantastic pilot funding from the Ohio State University, where I'm from, Chronic Brain Injury Discovery Team, and also from the Ohio State University Pelotonia Foundation, which is cancer. So that's neurotrauma and cancer. And also my whole department, physical medicine and rehabilitation, which has been amazing. I do, somehow I got involved in 3 different startups. No idea how that happened. So I do have a financial interest in 3 different startups, and one Kobo will actually be talking about today. So just a little quick introduction of what I do. So I'm a dancer first, but I am all about motion. I'm about the scholarship of motion in a transdisciplinary sense. So I looked at motion from the perspective of science, motor learning, technology, interactive arts, dance technology, engineering, biomechanics, art and motion dance. And the math of motion is also biomechanics, or the physics underlying biomechanics. and then medicine, so neurorehabilitation. And for the last 15 years, I have been incredibly fortunate to be embedded in an academic physiatry practice. So this is a practice of full physical medicine. They do physical medicine, they do physical MDs, MDs, and EOs, and nurse practitioners, providers. They're the people, you're talking about physical therapists, and that is a very important part. This is not the physiatrists, the doctors, and nurse practitioners. They actually are able to prescribe medication. And so they see a lot of neurotrauma where you have spasticity, and you have to do medication management of that spasticity. You know, do things like deep brain stimulation, do things like implanted pain modulation in the spinal cord. It's super cool. I get to be a fly on the wall. It's a dream come true. It's really important to get people to know this is the bottom of being in controlling someone. Like she was an occupational therapist in this very department. So all the BC work, like the chair at the time, Ray Johnson, basically said to her, I don't know what you're doing, but it's really working with our patients. And she went off and she saw my industry, right? So, yeah. Okay. So I don't know if you noticed, but the transdisciplinary, very disciplinary areas that I organic and naturally all around movement, they spell STEAM. So STEAM is an educational construct that says we need to put the arts in STEM. And there couldn't be a better example. It's absolutely great. Thank you so much. So my approach to STEAM is not educational. My passion is trying to help adults with neurotrauma to recover anything. And doctors in my department, providers in my department know they joke. You never want to wake up and sit down and you're a doctor. Because it means something really bad has happened to you. You injured your spinal cord, you had a stroke, you had a traumatic brain injury, you lost a leg. Yeah. So that is neurotrauma. Neurotrauma, we've talked a lot about neurodegeneration, Parkinson's, MS, they're conditions that cause progressive decline. And what we're trying to do is stop the decline. In neurotrauma, 50 years ago, before we understood about plasticity, we used to think you were done. There was no opportunity for gain function, other than compensation. We know now that's not true. The system relearns how to move. A fantastic example is the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation locomotor training program, where people with spinal cord injury, like Christopher Reeve, are put into a rock climbing harness on a treadmill, and therapy aids move their body, both legs and their hips, through the motion of walking on the treadmill. Somehow, the spare neurons descending through the whole system after spinal cord injury detect that environment, that context, or that constraint, the constraints-led environment. And essentially, there's some form of cognition that happens that I'm super interested in looking in neural systems, but there's some form of cognition that happens that to us looks like, oh, my body says, I used to know how to do this. Let me figure out how to do it again. The body doesn't remember that it used to know how to do it until it gets the stimuli. That could be a whole lecture in and of itself. Can we talk about it? Let me go. So, I study neurotrauma in recovery from neurotrauma, from using the tools of biomechanics. So Lena Ting might be on Zoom right now, but so she and I have known each other since I came to Stanford right after she went to Stanford. And I have just a long, rich history of being able to talk to these things. Biomechanics is essentially the quantification of any human signal, biophysical signal. So we tend to work in movement, but when we can program in MATLAB, so EEG, tend to look at force, kinematics, which is the shape of motion, electromyography, muscle activity. We can do heart rate variability. Basically, you give me a biophysical signal, I process it, and then I can interpret that. Thanks. That's where I come from. And I have a little mini BB here, a mini BB picture here, because she's amazing. So my process, I use the clinical trial process. That's pretty rigid. It's been defined differently, like cancer in different domains, but whatever. Here I've put up phase 1 is feasibility. So this actually follows the NIH Small Business Innovation Research structure. So the first time that you test a novel intervention in a population with neuropathology, brain population, we have a responsibility ethically to assess feasibility first. Are we doing no harm? Something simple like the first I developed required people to look at computer screens. Those computer screens are backlit. Is it okay for people with brain injury to look at that? Will that make their symptoms worse while I'm trying to make their symptoms better? So that's feasibility or tolerance in this context. And then phase 2 is ethics. So I'll say that most of my stuff is in feasibility phase. I do have an R21 right now to look at efficacy that we'll talk about in a second. But I totally get it that for the people, like people working in theory, who can like test the theory and be like, aha, it works, we create science. It is the glacial case. But of course, the minute that you put the holistic human organism into your intervention, it becomes complicated. And this is the process that ethically we follow. My mission is to move the needle for people who have experienced neural deficit. So if I were to play that out, so to improve the health, wellness, and real world function for persons with neurotrauma. The approach that I use is this sort of aesthetic medicine idea that we're all talking about. So my project is to build evidence for aesthetic medicine in whatever form that takes. I have access to people who really want to work with me, people with neurotrauma who really want to work with me, and every once in a while I'll find Madeline's adaptive tango. I found Madeline's adaptive tango. I was like, oh, I'm going to try to neurotrauma. Let's give it a try. Jane McGonagall's aims for better. She wrote the book Reality's Broken. She's a game designer. She's designed a social health game. Call up Jane. Hey, do you want to test this in people with concussion? We have an NIH grant to do that. So I'm a bit eclectic and agnostic with what we mean by aesthetic, but I'm a dancer, so that's really where my expertise is. So Joe D'Souza, who's here, actually suggested, oh yeah, you're right there, I'm looking right after. Suggested, I think like 2015, there's like a Frontiers paper, and it was the sort of hope for dancing as an opportunity to integrate physical and cognitive rehabilitation. It's a fantastic paper. So I've been trying at the American College of Rehabilitation Medicine to advance that agenda. And specifically what seems to be catching right now is neurologic music, the music therapy. Music therapy started out to be indicated only for emotional, social, emotional health. And Michael Todd came up with enough evidence and lobbied really hard and created a neurologic music therapy profession. And in neurologic music therapy, you can address physical outcomes. You can't in regular music therapy. I'm suggesting we do the same thing for dance. Dance movement therapy, I don't know if the movement therapist is here, which is brilliant that she was here, but their licensing is social work. So they cannot build their diagnostic codes, their whole infrastructure, their whole economics, forbid or obviate the use of dance for physical rehabilitation. They can only do social emotional. We want to change that. But obviously we need evidence to lobby insurance with. Great fun. Great answers. We're used to things being hard, right? So I tend to use this big framework, the pillars of health and wellness that the World Health Organization has put out. I think it's at Lobby also referenced this the other day. WHO has said, really, if we're really going to talk about health and wellness, we have to examine, we have to consider the physical domain, the emotional domain, and the social domain. Interestingly, cognitive is not in here. Because for them, I believe that cognitive is embedded within these three areas: physical, emotional, and social. Take-home message here is that we need holistic, practical solutions for neurotrauma. We got nothing for these patients, even with mild concussion. Sorry. Okay, dance is promising. Let's see where we're at. So, first level that we have to address in this mission that I have is whether dance is feasible first, and then efficacious next for clients with combinatorial deficits that impede movement and cognition in concert. And let me take a second to go through what I mean by that, right after I take a sip of water. Okay. Oh, and this is a gratuitous picture of my children, if you were on the laptop. Okay, design for combinatorial deficits. So if you're not on the PowerPoint, I'm going to mock this up. If you think sort of design thinking, we can actually map the solution space, is what we would say map, that we need to be addressing. If you were to plot on two axes for an individual person, Courtney, I'll say, when they didn't introduce Courtney and Jackie, both answers. Courtney is starting a doctorate of occupational therapy in the fall. She's been working with me off and on for 10 years. She's still stuck with me. It's amazing. I finally got that over when I was able to hire her full time in August. Jackie has just started in February. Jackie's undergrad is in bioengineering. So, I couldn't be more fortunate, you guys. I had to feel like a family emergency 2 weeks ago. They have done before. I'm so fortunate. Okay. So we're going to plot a function for an individual. Let's say Courtney. We're going to plot motor on the y-axis, motor function available to her on the y-axis, cognitive function available to her on the x-axis. At the corner here, we're going to start with low and low in both domains. And as we go up, we'll go to medium and high. This doesn't need to be high resolution. Courtney is going to end up in the high motor and high cognitive. That's great. Congratulations, Courtney. So we have a lot of solutions for this space, right? People who are high motor, high cognitive, they want to get better, healthier, tons of health solutions in sports. The world is their oyster. Now, we talk about even mild neurotrauma. Okay, and we start to get into this gray zone. So if you have, you might have high cognitive, but medium motor. You start to have fewer solutions here. If you have high motor, but medium cognitive, same thing. So I think that we have a lot of cognitive people in the audience, so I'll just use that example. If you have your motor facility, you have key grip, right? You've got grasp, you have these things that you study biomechanically. You can walk, you have automaticity when you're walking. But you start to have mild cognitive decline, like what Malcolm studies. We have to find ways to engage you in physical rehabilitation that work with the parts of your brain that aren't processing things at a high level. And that's why dance is so important, and that's why what Greg and I is doing with Appetito is so perfect. because she's engaging people on a visceral, fundamental level, despite these processing issues. They might have issues in memory, they might have issues in language processing. You throw it at her, she can handle it with Tango. It's an extremely adaptive form. Okay. Once you get below medium, in both domains, or like low in either motor or cognitive, guys, we have nothing. It's horrible. It becomes very top down, very much a therapist, some clinical person has to work with someone and walk them through things very hierarchically. It's not participatory. So I have a picture here of like an emoji is being like on the screen, because that's kind of how I felt when I put this together. So first thing I came up with was embedded arts. You guys, I did a dance and technology track for my MFA, and this was literally the second, this interactive aesthetic that I created that now has been validated and commercialized for use in rehabilitation. It was the second assignment that I did in my interactive arts program class. I mean, like, I barely changed it since then. Okay, to demonstrate this, if you look on the screen, you'll see pictures. Each of these, I use an abstract expressionist aesthetic for it. Each of these pictures was created by somebody with neurotrauma while they were rehabilitating from the neurotrauma. And I want to show what it looks like. So this is the company that I'm commercializing it. And I'm going to try experiment. I'm going to try actually walking around with this computer and letting each of you kind of try it. That's not. So if you're on the screen, you can see a video of a person who's using a walker. This is my friend Brad. Car accident when he was in high school, spinal cord injured. He's gone through the first, he's actually technically paraplegic. He's technically quadriplegic, right? So all four affected. He went through the Christopher Vayner Foundation locomotor training protocol, and is like their poster child. He's had remarkable recovery. Also, he's awesome. Here. So all this program does is I put a sensor. It's a $10 sensor that you get off Amazon. You strap it to people's legs or arms, whatever part you need them to move. And then the sensor moves. As they move, they get aesthetic biofeedback. Super simple concept. Super simple concept. We've been doing biofeedback for forever. Fantastic. With limited evidence of efficacy, part of my hypothesis was trackpad. So that's it. This, you guys, it's like matte paint. This is the simplest aesthetic. And really the proof of concept, just like move the proof of concept that I was working with was simply, if we just make this a little bit aesthetically engaging. We made this a little bit aesthetically engaging. Could we get more bang for buck, more return on investment? So what's revolutionary about the physical experience of this is that each of you were able to control this very easily because you have function. But when you just lost function, the sensation, the experience of having control over something aesthetic is super powerful. Really quickly, actually, I'm just going to move on. So I actually have my phone set up to work as a gyro now. So I use a gyroscope because in the the early research, the design research that I did, that I published in the Dance Research Journal, I found that people got bored unless I figured out a way to turn off, inhibit their frontal lobe, their executive control. So when they were trying to figure it out, it didn't work as well. But if I used a gyro and the feedback was moving in a way that made sense to their frontal lobe, their executive control or conscious awareness, they went into a flow state. That's when quality gets it. And in that flow state, they were trying to figure out with their body. They were exploring physical intelligence. Happy to show that to anybody afterward. Oh, and here's Kelsey. Kelsey actually worked with me on this project. She's doing She's doing her master's at Columbia now in neuroscience, dancer. Okay, let's see if the computer, let's move back to it. Yeah, okay, what is it? It's aesthetically engaging motion bar feedback. Designed to augment the experience of inpatient, outpatient motion therapies. The idea is we know it works. We just can't get people to buy in or intrinsically motivate to do it. So that's where the art comes in. I validated it in physical therapy, occupational therapy, and recreational therapy, in both inpatient and outpatient care. A little bit of data. So I told you about the qualitative data. We're looking for flow, and we were looking for what that meant is that we were qualitatively looking for people to lose track of time. If they were asked, "Do you want to stop?" they actually could really verbalize, "No." When they could verbalize, "I want to keep going," it took the form of something like, "I just want to finish this." In the meantime, we're all back there like, "This is abstract art. There's no this. There's no points." But they had self-identified something that they were working on. Okay, we just empower the patient. This is not rocket science. This is art, interactive art to be precise. Okay, I didn't do complicated body mechanics here. This is not practical. Often because we suffer from this forced use of technology in biomechanics engineering, so avoid that. I just looked at dose, just videotaped and then had Courtney and Kelsey, people like Courtney and Kelsey actually just code using an existing scheme published by Lyman et al. About what was passive versus active engagement in their therapy. And found that it's not a large group. Actually, guys, kind of need 8 people, and this thing got commercialized. But now it's like, we never know when the small business is going to go under, whatever. Like, I just got a royalty payment, like that was a surprise. That's not going to last. But healthcare is really, really, really hard these days, but whatever. Another talk. So essentially, we had people who did therapy without the feedback, and then people who did comparable therapy with the feedback. This was therapist directed. So they said what they wanted the person to do, it just involved movement. People with feedback did a higher dose. And then that's per session, they did a higher dose. The first session, the effect was a little bit less, but by the second session, they learned it. Okay, so what I'm gonna say is that there's embodied learning by the second session among people with neuropathology. And we did people with cancer, we did people with MS, we did lots of different types of things. Okay, this is cool. I was able to look, thanks to the coding, at mean duration active periods between groups. And in fact, the feedback, they were having longer. So not only did they have a larger dose, but their bouts of activity were longer in comparison. So they just didn't stop. They didn't want to stop. We were actually having to stop them at the end of the session. In inpatient, we had to stop people so they could go to lunch. It's pretty awesome. Now, we also could look at the rest periods. No change in rest periods. So they didn't need more rest. And so what we know from music, dopamine work, there's something about the arts that enable people to put in more work, like as a mechanical construct, without needing as much rest. Summary. It's against technology, it's called embedded arts, or the company is called Kobo. Feasible for use by clients with neuropathy, increased flow, qualitative, and dose during medicalized motion treatment. Great. Among clients, here's the big thing. In inpatient, we're actually able to look at their functional independence measure levels and validate that even people with a functional independence measure or FIN score of medium to very low, who are almost completely dependent on other people to cognate or to move. Even people with low and medium FIN scores in motor, in combinatorily, were able to use this and engage it. And that's a huge win. Adapted tango. So here's the thing. I've actually adapted Madeline's Adapt Tango. So, one of my reviewers suggested that, NIH reviewers suggested that I play embodied tango, which I think is way better than adapted tango. So I'm going to go with embodied tango. So little difference between the two of us, and we are going to get everybody up. Everybody can come up. And we've got Courtney and Jack here to help. What would be great is if people would form a circle here, and in tango, we go counterclockwise. I think there's some philosophical reason for that, but I don't know what it is. So you go counterclockwise. So everybody just get up. And we go solo first. So the first thing we teach people with we've done it with people with concussion and breast cancer survivors So the first thing we teach is the weight shift. Okay, so in tango, you're going to weight shift to a beat, and we're going to do an intriguing beat of slow, slow, quick, quick, slow. Thank you. Slow, slow, quick, quick, slow. Slow, slow, quick, quick, slow. You guys do it like facing out, not facing face. What if you should be facing a different way, but not partner? Oh, there we go. There we go. I should have rehearsed this. I didn't. Throwing it in both feet. Okay, so we're gonna go. We're always going to inside first. The leg. We want to move the inside leg first. So right now we're just going to shift to the inside leg. Slow. Slow to the outside leg. Now, quick, quick, slow. Slow, slow, quick, quick, slow. Right now. Tango is a long dance, so you don't have to really exaggerate anything. The hip motion comes naturally. So now do it. And I know it's really tempting to be like, especially, I don't know, the first time I learned it, That's not it. It's not really So we're just gonna walk. We're gonna walk to the inside, slow. Weight shift here. Weight shift outside, slow. Quick, quick, slow. Slow, just gonna walk. Slow. Quick, quick, slow. Great. Now.
So you do alternate your weight. So
Yeah, you're
next
walking
slow,
here.
you're gonna step out.
Slow. Into the inside. Slow to the outside. Quick, quick,
Slow.
slow.
So now I'm ending up on the inside. Now
That's
I'm
right. That's
connecting
right.
to the outside.
That's exactly right. Thank you. Thanks for clarification. Okay, now what we're teaching them is embodied. So the term that seems to work with everybody is find gravity. Okay, I'm going to give you a tip. It's going to happen in your vestibular area. Okay, so just think about your ear and how your ear is aligning over your body to find gravity as you walk. Just weight shift. Okay, so here we go. I can do this with my head. This is a forward backward. Perturbation. I can do side to side. Perturbation. I'm just going to keep my head right in the middle of that manifold, that solution space. As I go. Slow, finding gravity. Slow to the outside. Quick, quick, slow. Now we walk. When you walk, you're going to have an acceleration. Okay, you're healthy, theoretically. I've had 2 concussions on the years, so you're probably not going to pick up on it, but try to pick up on it as you walk forward. There's a little acceleration, maybe even jerk happening in the sagittal plane of the head. Inside leg first. Slow, and I've controlled my head. Now we collect. Okay, intended to always collect between each step, but that's how Madeline has it. Now we're going to step on the outside. Or number. On the outside, still key into that head, the weight shift with the sagittal movement of the head. Outside, step, slow, collect. I'm going to do quick, slow. Ready? Quick, collect, quick, collect, slow. One more time. Slow, this is the outside going, collect. Slow, collect, weight shift, inhale, quick, quick, slow. Great, now we partner. So, Jackie and Courtney, we're gonna go together. The first thing that we do, this is important for concussion. They have a lot of neck pain, and they have a lot of headache. So I've adapted the partner hold so that you actually drop your neck. Okay, so drop your shoulders. Is this footing we're here at the base of your skull? Kind of giving a little normal sleep dislocation. Rise up. Root through your feet, up here, the skull. Drop the shoulders. And then your elbows, I want you to tuck them just a little bit. So remember, Lena and Madeline's work showing that this is less than 5% of your body. Okay? So if I were to come up behind you, what I'm doing is asking for scapular stabilization. And I can put my finger right here and just give the slightest and they'll pull toward your body. That's it. That's the amount of force. And I can go ahead and do that for everybody. So, okay, so here I'll do Rebecca. So if you were to use your hands, put your fingers, yeah. So Rebecca's demonstrating, we've got people demonstrating the leader who's in the Rebecca position has their hands under. The follower has their hands over. Now, both of you find a way to put your fingers on the inside of the elbow, and then you find your thumb. Right. Now, each of you put just the slightest pressure out and allow your body to error adjust in. Okay. You want to tuck your elbows in your stomach. So pull and tuck in. Tuck in. Yes. Did you feel how your scapula stabilized? Yes. Right. That's it. I can do this with everybody. I'm a little passionate about it. Okay, so we've got scapular stabilized, neck is long. Now we go back to our sway. So to the leader's left foot, sway. Oh, yeah, that's right. Inside, we're going to the inside. Sway, slow. To the outside, sway, slow. Good. Now we're going to do it quick, quick. Quick, quick, slow. Now, in this case, the leader, the person in the Courtney or the Rebecca position, is leading, but this is a conversation that we've had lots of people mention. So, follower, you're fully empowered. You can back lead, or you can walk. So, okay. Now, we need to try to do this with partnering and walking. Okay. So at this point, we're talking dual task because not only do you have your movement, but you are doing spatial navigation and interpersonal navigation with another person. So just recognize it. Somebody who's concussed, this is hard. We actually had to reduce it to 1-to-1. You can't do it in a group. Okay. The person who's in the leader is going to step with their left foot, so the inside foot. The person who's the follower, try to detect that through your arms and just follow. Oh, one more thing. Lean slightly toward each other, just the slightest little bit. So you've coupled your systems. You've coupled them in the frontal plane with this little bit of tension here, and you've coupled them in the sagittal plane with this lean. Now, we're going to demonstrate. Courtney, go ahead and take a step, and Jackie's going to follow you. Good. Collect. Step. Collect. Quick, 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 collect, quick. So at one point, Jackie started backing a little bit. Good, do it again. This is really good. Yeah. So dialectic behavior therapy from the psychologist would embody, be in the moment, just be in the moment. Okay. I'm going to come around, give it a try. So on the inside foot for the leaders, get your coupling together. This plane, this plane. As a unit, move your inside leg forward and left. Now move your outside leg forward, Sorry. So if you're the leader, I'm sorry, if you're the leader, you should be, yeah, there we go. Said that. Sorry, I'm right. Okay, again, from the top. Here we go. Inside leg, step, left, step, no, quick, left, slow, left. Okay, now, you have your time. This time, if you feel that your arms are moving back and forth, secure your frame. That's your couple. Your force couple. Okay, so, and let's try it again. Inside right. Step, left, step, left, quick, slow. Great. All right, I'm gonna put some music on. I'm invited because music's gonna work. So, and then we'll do Johnny Smooth.
Okay, you guys can like practice while you're there.
Everybody's doing the right thing. Yep. Pass on the inside. Slow. Slow. Quick. Slow. Fancy. So now you can improvise on top of this. Just don't lose your force couple. You can sway your shoulders. You can move side to side. You can throw in a door, like what Courtney and Jackie have done. I've been talking about that. Or you can do the basic step.
Yes. Beat your chest. Yes, that's fun.
You guys, that was gorgeous. Right. That was absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Okay. Let's sit down in like the 2 minutes I have left. Okay. So I'm going to jump right back into this discussion. Sorry to like bait and switch. I got you guys moving and now I'm going to sit down and listen to me. Okay. Treat the freaking question. First of all, expect half the world to have suffered a brain injury in their lifetime. Moss et al. Wrote in the Lancet. They did large meta-analysis, 2017. 50% of global population will have some kind of brain injury that's going to be traumatic or acquired stroke in their lifetimes. Now, the half that doesn't have traumatic brain injury or stroke is probably a caregiver. So just, when we're talking about being kind to people, know what they're going through, consider the possibility that one of the things that they're going through is brain injury or caring for someone with brain injury. The vast majority of those brain injuries are concussion, but as somebody who has had a concussion from a car accident with loss of consciousness, I'll tell you it lasts on that. Okay, when mild TBI symptoms persist for longer than 3 weeks, basically it means that medical science has no idea what to do with these people. They just fall through the cracks, okay? The latest research is showing that there are some things, not going into detail, some physiologic realities underlying these persistent concussion symptoms. Sometimes we call it post-concussion syndrome. Motor cognitive integration. We're doing an okay job of rehabilitating the cognitive. We're doing an okay job of rehabilitating the motor. We're not rehabilitating what they call dual tasks, which everybody's talking about. Here, fantastic. We're not rehabilitating their ocular motor deficits. So with the impact, oftentimes ocular nerve is damaged and their eyes literally don't crack. So when they get tired, you'll see their eyes float apart. It's like dramatic. Occupational therapy has started treating that by actually having people do eye tracking. Loss of complexity in sensory motor. My colleague and collaborator, Keith Yates, showed that if you look at postural control in teens who have been concussed, the thing that determines, you can actually determine who's been concussed and who isn't, who hasn't, based on their sample. So that's if your postural control, you want a lot of postural sway, and you want that postural sway to have a lot of variation in the movement pattern. That's redundant. The system needs to be redundant to function. We lose that redundancy. We can measure that as loss of complexity. PTSD, you guys. I mean, we just sort of figured out that accident, that there's a visceral memory of that acceleration, that momentum. So, probably guess that when we're doing Tango, I've adapted that Tango to address each of these. And you can probably put it together based on what you just saw. I'm happy to talk more about that. Okay, here's posture control, here's how we measure it. Quick thing about methods. So I wrote a paper that define the norm for middle-aged people. It's like administrative assistants, executive assistants on my hallway in the medical center. They all came in 6 days. Courtney helped me on this project, and she's on the paper. And we used that to actually define within subject variability, typical within subject variability for people who are not super healthy, but relatively healthy, right? They're not neurodeficit. So now I can use those data. This is on the screen, there's data from one person. It's an 82-year-old who had a hip replacement. She went through 2 anesthesia interventions with us. When she started, her variability in the frontal plane was way above the threshold for fall risk that was determined about 1994 by Brian Mackey in Canada, the Canadian chair for something. Like way above, like more than twice what it should have been. She did 20 sessions of Tango, and her postural control in the lateral plane, this indicator of future fall risk, dropped to right where we wanted. Okay, 1 month after she finished Tango, it went back up. Soon after that, we gave her like 6 sessions of embedded hearts, just putting it on a leg and just trying to make heart with one leg. And her balance variability in the medial planes indicator of future fall risk, boom, dropped right back down to where we want it to be. 1 month after that, it dropped right back up. Initially, when I looked at this data, I couldn't tell if this was random chance or not. Now that I've done the definition of within subject variability, I can say this looks like certainly the effect size that we have here exceeds typical within subject variability that you would expect for a healthy person, a healthy middle-aged person. It's just sort of like some of the things that we can do with quantitative. I have no cool slide for my results. Okay, I've done 6 adults with chronic MTBI, 4 females. Movement to music is about 20 minutes. Honestly, I've seen an effect in like 12. I haven't tried less than 12, but I've probably seen an effect in less than 12 with exactly what you're talking about. We don't go through what are the first 8 steps in Madeline's Tango protocol. because I'm not trying to rehabilitate cognitive. I'm trying to de-escalate the anxiety associated with cognitive and reintegrate cognitive work. Rating of perceived exertion is low, okay? So this is mild to moderate. This is not high aerobic. Satisfaction was high. I take the intrinsic motivation inventory, which is from self-determination theory, and they rate themselves as very high, very highly intrinsically motivated. Their symptoms improve within and between that take patient-reported outcomes at the beginning of the session, at the end, even if it's 12 minutes of intervention. Boom, like how do you feel? How do you feel? Ecological momentary assessments. So they improve within, like, basically always. If I can control the stimulus, make sure the volume's not too loud, make sure the lights are not too annoying, I can always reduce their symptoms, how they improve, how they feel. And between, so longitudinal, and then control of COP pathway is also improved. It's basically percent pressure. Your body's faster than thought control of neuromotor processes. Okay, so we have to collect these at 1,000 hertz to even get, any semblance of good signal without the aliasing happening. It's 1,000 hertz per second, way faster than cognition is happening. And then I have one person who I collected MRI data on, and a colleague did a myelin analysis on. I have no idea what that, but Dr. does. So, and we actually did show, I should have 3 with COVID happened right before the last two. The last 2 had their post-test, so we have 1, whatever. So we did show this one person with only 12 sessions over 6 weeks, increased mind compaction within and between the somatomotor, cortical striatal, and inferior longitudinal fasciculus regions. So that's sensory motor, action goal planning, and visually guided decisions. How am I doing on time? I'll wrap up. Also doing it with chemotherapy induced neuropathy. Super excited about that. That's what MyR21 is in. Just a real quick embodied cognition and learning framework. I want to suggest that there is a problem with current care, and part of the problem is what I call a hegemony of the brain. This idea that mind over matter is, I will tell you, you cannot think your way back from brain injury or spinal cord injury. You have to move your way back from brain injury and spinal cord injury. So I think that the brain-centric really breaks down neurorehabilitation, and it's really, you can say it's a fascinating model. It's also a humanitarian model for that reason. So instead, I think what's happening with embodied cognition and learning, from my perspective, is a matter of the mind framework or paradigm. I want to suggest that the dynamic systems approach or dynamical systems approach is a classical mechanics approach. Actually explains this and makes it even, that the body is self-organizing around physics, around natural forces. And the biggest natural force that we have is gravity. So I'm going to suggest that when we're finding gravity, that graviception within the vestibular system, we are actually inducing self-organization of the system through dance. And then I did a TED talk, it's actually not that great, but the body knows more than we think. It's a great catchphrase. I'll do it one day. No surprise for this audience, dance provides opportunity for embodied learning after neurotrauma. In 2011, I worked with Dee Reynolds from Dance Research Journal to try to publish these ideas in their special issue on dance and neuroscience. If you have a chance, check out the special issue, it's awesome. You guys, everybody's covered this. There's nonverbal cueing, there's implicit skill acquisition, there's rhythmic auditory stimulation. Like, here are the pathways to action in dance. Now, participatory art model, that's one that we still have to deal with. Sometimes we talk about agency or aesthetic agency, but it really is the participatory art model or civic engagement. I think that dance provides ways to decolonize our pedagogy, decolonize our therapies. Many people know what that means, everybody else just ask me later. I think that dance is a manifestation or embodiment of the self-determination theory that Becky and Ryan published in 2007 that says that people are motivated to overturn, like Freudian, Jungian, whatever, in my mind, people are motivated by three things, and three things can explain the majority of variables in motivation: autonomy, competence, and social connection. And that's where the intrinsic motivation inventory comes from, and that's why we use it. My PhD advisor is Diane Playford from Warwick, University of Warwick, and she took me on because she's really excited about play for neurorehab. And so we have a hypothesis that we're trying to write into a paper, that dance is a manifestation, or can be used as a manifestation, can be deployed as a manifestation of adult play. And I want to say, where am I presenting this work? If you want to see this stuff, American Society of Biomechanics, they actually don't have anybody in their like biomechanics and rehab, so I've been asked to be on the program committee twice now. And we're really, Lena has been super influential. So we're really trying to advocate for neurorehab biomechanics. And then I'm also presenting at the American College of Rehabilitation Medicine, the largest interdisciplinary rehab conference in the world. That's their tagline. We have an arts and neuroscience networking group. I was a founding member of that, and currently I'm the ACRM program committee representing that group. So I would love to see all of you at ACRM. It's a continuing education credit. People, clinicians there for CCs, so it's more expensive. But talk to me if you want to present. We need to show your stuff. You guys are all brilliant and so excited to be here. And if I don't know if anybody wants to do this again next year, like we need to convene the movement people. Liz London and I were at a National Academies event where I tried to do this and it didn't work. And Liz and I have been like, I just need to convene the movement people, and you guys have done it. And I would love to continue that. You know, Madeline and you would help me continue that next year if people are interested.
One or two questions. Yes. Thank you for
your talk. So can you tell us, about challenges, if any, as you go from say accessibility with small number of subjects to the efficacy of clinical trials, and what kind of collaboration you need to get in establishing to support?
What a great question. Thank you for the opportunity. I need cognitive people. I need brain people. Biomarkers brain. I can measure motor behavior, so the cows come home. I need it central. And so that's the R01 that I'll be putting off of this R21. The R21 is PROs, patient-reported outcomes, outcome measures like TUG, and biomechanical. I need cognitive, I need biomarkers. So please contact me.
Project that we just started last year, which is on the neurocognition of liveness. Now, what do I mean by that? So liveness is something that is central to the performing arts, dance, theater, music, and it relates to the question as to what is the difference between going to a concert and listening to music at home? What is the difference between going to the theater and a stream theater performance? What is the difference between watching a live dance performance as well as a live dance recording? But it is obviously the project, we thought about it, designed it before COVID, but after the pandemic, obviously this whole question has a new form of relevance because it also relates to whether we have a meeting in person or not, whether we have a conference like this or online. So all these questions relate to liveness. And neuroscience or like psychology doesn't really have a history of dealing with liveness as far as I know, but it's a big topic in theater and performance studies. And the debate around liveness really starts with a performance scholar Peggy Phelan in the 90s, who wrote a very famous essay on the ontology of performance and performance art. And she argues that performance's only life is in the present. Performance cannot be saved, recorded, and documented. Performance's being becomes itself through disappearance. And when I first read this, I thought this is a really interesting challenge from a scientific point of view, because if liveness really is ephemeral in that sense, and if liveness is a central feature of the performing arts, dance, theater, music, opera, performance art, then how can we study something that by its very definition is not replicable? So I think that's the starting point for that project. And really, I think the place of the performing art to look at that question is dance, because out of all the performing arts, historically, dance is the one that is most difficult or has most heavily relied on liveness. And so recording dance is really difficult. It really only starts with like the invention of video. And before that, we weren't really able to do any form of dance recording. So, and even notation systems in dance don't really, I mean, they do exist. So I've put here in the presentation an example of Laban notation, which is sort of one of the more prominent one. And Laban notation works quite similar to music notation in that it has bars, so it's metric, but it goes from top to bottom. And you can see, so in the center are the feet and the sort of like color where the weight is on. And the further you move out to the sides, the more sort of you move up towards distal parts of the body. So like arms and heads, and you can essentially go as wide as you want to. So you can code things like, I don't know, ear movements if you want to, but it becomes quite unwieldy and complicated. And it's not used very much by dancers or choreographers in practice. So in talking about dance, I find it very useful. I find the work of dance philosopher Anna Paetz very useful. And she writes about the role of liveness and also the role of dancing and choreography. And I'm just going to read that out now. Dances, as distinct from the acts of dancing or performance, which instantiate them, do not seem to be physical things. They are neither events nor tangible artifacts that can be picked up, misplaced, moved around, or stolen. And in this respect, they seem unlike paintings, although dances are in some historical and cultural contexts created, appreciated, and analyzed as artworks embodying ideas and meanings. And I think this distinction between dances and dancing is a really important one, also for people like us who are sort of trying to or aiming at the science of dancing. So I think most of the talks, for example, yesterday or today, really talk about dancing, the act of dancing as a motor behavior. But when we talk about dance, relationship between dance and music or dance and language, we really do not so much talk about dancing anymore, but the act of making dances. So the act of choreography. And in that response, then we need to talk about, we need to sort of remind ourselves of the historical and cultural context in which these dances are made, which differ widely. So I think apart from the technical challenges that a science of dance faces, there's also a conceptual challenge that we sort of need to think very carefully about the vocabulary that we're losing and what part of dancing we're actually researching. So the Neurolife project is a 5-year project, and the central idea of the project is that we have artistic research happening in parallel to sort of more experimental lab-based controlled research, where we sort of, on the one hand, look at how do artists, choreographers, dance artists in particular generate liveness. And on the other hand, how can we sort of think about experiments where we manipulate liveness in a more controlled setting. But the central piece of the Neurolife project are a series of 4 live dance performances that we commission, 1 per each year, in which sort of artists and scientists meet and sort of have a process together to sort of develop a dance performance that double functions both as a practice-based investigation into liveness and a neuroscientific study on liveness. And at this point, Matthias would come in, but the central idea of the project really is that life experiences are quantifiable as the mutual entanglement between the minds, brains, and bodies of performers and spectators in a defined here and then. The first performance of this happened last year and was created by Sekechi Mutemwende and in collaboration with Steph McMahon. And it's called Detective Work. And again, at this point, I would ask Matthias to sort of explain a little bit more about the artistic process of making this work. So I'm just going to do a very crude summary of that. So it really evolves around ideas of mystery. It evolves around ideas of like how choreography itself is a form of solving mysteries. And in terms of sort of more sort of like structural questions, the work really is interested in that balance between improvisation and fixing and choreography. So we had sort of notions of that in yesterday's talk already. So the idea that there's on one hand self-paced movement, or sort of externally guided movement, but also that movement and music can be improvised or it can be really set. And the whole choreography, which is sort of an hour long, plays with these on a continuous level, which is sort of fixing and improvising. And I am going to show, I'm not quite sure, I'm just going to show, try to show, I wanted to show you 5 minutes of the choreography. So we're just going to do that. So now we could have sound, but maybe we won't, but I'll just play it anyway. So you'll get a sense in some ways. And since the project is about liveness, you also get a sense of what gets lost in the process of showing this. So let's just try and see, I hope maybe you can have some sound on your computers. If you have headphones, just put them on. We're just going to look at that for 5 minutes now. Yeah.
how far we're going to go. So, well, that applause really is for the makers of the work, for the entire team of artists and everyone around them who've created this work over the course of a few months, really. So I'm not going to talk too much about the artistic side because I don't sort of want to impose my opinion or my view of things that Matthias should have carefully summarized in a different way. But what I will say is, I guess what this illustrates is kind of like this question around what is special around the live experience of dance and what gets lost in the sort of recording and sort of conveying it is really the focus of the project. And you can see from like a few things that you can see that we picked upon this conference is that like the relationship between dance and music is a complicated one. And so these two exist together. So the composition was made for that choreography, but at the same time, there's no straightforward link in terms of rhythmicality and what the performance going on. So the two respond to each other. They're not totally unrelated, but they work together. And then the other thing that I want to say is that dance is sort of like constantly on this continuum of being sort of abstract and sort of being a sequence of movements, but also the gestural component of like expression and sort of more sort of meaningful, which then sort of gives us all these associations about detective poses in this case, and all the sort of possible ambiguities in between. So at what point does something become abstract, and at what point does it carry meaning? So those are all things that this work plays with. In addition to, of course, everything else, the lighting, the costume, the stage design, the way the people are positioned around the stage, and all of these things matter and are part of the dance experience, which get lost in the sort of recording up to a point. So I'm just showing a few more pictures of these. The question for us really now is moving, oops, let's go back to full screen mode. Slide. There we go. So the question then for us from a scientific perspective is, well, how do we even approach this level of complexity in a scientific way? And the basic work for this, like the sort of starter or sort of pilot project, if you want to, was work that we did back in between 2014 and 2017, also with Matthias Sperling, who choreographed this line at work, which had a much more focused question around what is the role of movement synchrony in our engagement or self-appreciation of dance. So synchrony is a really important aesthetic feature of dance. We all think of, you know, whether it's street dance, ballet, it's always this moment where sort of groups of dancers suddenly erupt in this huge sequence of like unison movement, and it's a very engaging experience. So we wanted to look at that in a sort of more controlled experimental way. So again, we designed the choreography Matthias did that explicitly manipulated synchrony over the course of the entire performance. This is what you see here in red. So the choreography is for 10-10 performance. It's based on a lot of everyday movements. It's not performed to music, so there's no movement here at all, music here at all. It's also synchrony based on the sort of emergent interactions between the performers while they're on stage. We showed quite pedestrian everyday movements because, as Bea has shown, dance styles and sort of expertise matters in terms of how our brains connect with what we see. So we wanted to base the choreography on sort of movements that everybody can sort of mirror if you want to. And so you see all of the performers wear these wrist sensors, which are accelerometers. And from there, we sort of compute using cross recurrence analysis a measure of synchrony across the entire performance, which you see in red. And then we have audience members. We performed this choreography 5 times to 5 different audiences while they were watching this, and they made continuous ratings using tablet computers about enjoyment, so how much they enjoyed the performance. And we also collected heart rate data from the audience members. And what you see in blue is the data for one of these performances. I think it's 15 spectators average, so their enjoyment, continuous enjoyment data over the course of the performance. And what we can show is that using major causality measures is that the synchrony of the performance predicts the enjoyment of the audiences in a systematic way. But it's not a simple linear relationship in the sense that people want to see synchronous movement. Like the relationship between pleasure or audience engagement and synchrony depends very much on context. It depends on where in the performance that happens, and it depends on, for example, how fast a change in synchrony occurs. So for you can see towards the end, you see like these three little peaks of synchrony here, and those are moments of collective stopping. So there's lots of chaos going on. Think Michael Jackson Thriller, and then everyone stops at the same time. And those are really pleasant and pleasurable moments in time, which the audience responds to instantly with a delay of like within within a few seconds of that happening. But then in the earliest sections of the performance, you have like this sort of red thing that goes down, which is a sort of gradual, gradual increasing of chaos. It becomes ever more desynchronized and disorganized, and that's pleasurable too, as long as it is sort of like takes you along to that. So that project really was the starting point, and we're now asking sort of a more general question around liveness, through the work of detective work. So we're going to first look at some data from the two performances. So this is all very preliminary, so we've only started analyzing this data really in this year. So it's more exploratory and descriptive at this stage. So we performed this night for 3 nights, and what you see here on the left side are the first 5 minutes that we just saw, the location of Seki and Steph over time on stage. So like it's